The sun hung low over the open plains, painting the dry grasslands in shades of dying gold. The wind carried dust and silence, the kind that made men think twice before speaking. A single wagon stood in the middle of nowhere, wooden boards, creaking under the weight of two souls who had seen too much in too little time. Elias Ward, a rancher whose name was known across the valley not for his cattle but for his silence, stood motionless at the back of the wagon. His weathered hand rested gently on the shoulder of a woman trembling before him. Her name was Clara. Once full of laughter, she was now a ghost in her own skin, bruised, bloodied and broken. Her torn white shirt clung to her like a memory of purity long gone, and her lips quivered as she whispered the words that would burn into Elias's mind forever. "I beg you, it hurts so bad." Elias didn't answer. His jaw clenched as he looked out across the plains. The evening wind brushed against his face, bringing with it the faint sound of coyotes howling far away. He knew they'd be closer by nightfall. He had found her just hours before, crawling out from a ravine behind the old mining road. Her horse lay dead in the gully, a bullet between its eyes. Whoever did this had left her for the buzzards. She was barely alive when he carried her back to his wagon. Now, with the light fading and blood seeping through her fingers, Elias knew the truth. She wouldn't make it to town. "Elias," she gasped, struggling for air, "you promised me. You wouldn't let me suffer." He turned his face away. "Don't talk like that, Clara. You're gonna make it." She laughed weakly, a broken, trembling sound. "You can't even look at me." His chest tightened. The plains stretched endless and empty, a mirror of the helplessness inside him. For years, Elias had lived by one rule: never get close to anyone again. He had buried his wife and daughter after a fever took them in a single winter. Since then, he had spoken to the cattle more than people. But Clara had changed that. She had been fire in human form, stubborn, sharp, alive. The saloon singer who somehow found her way to his lonely ranch, who brought color back to his black and white world, and now she was dying in his wagon. He knelt down beside her, brushing hair from her face. "Hold on, Clara. I'll ride to town." "Get help." "You won't make it," she whispered. "By the time you get back, I'll be gone. Please, Elias." Her hand found his, cold, trembling, desperate. He looked at her, really looked, at the fear in her eyes, the pain twisting her face. He knew what she was asking, not for comfort, not for mercy, for an ending. The silence stretched until even the wind seemed to stop. Elias's heart pounded like hooves in his chest. His hand hovered near his revolver, the same Colt that had protected his land from rustlers and wolves. But never like this. "I can't," he whispered. "Not to you." Her lips trembled. "Then you'll let me die slow?" The words stabbed deeper than any knife. Elias stood, pacing a few steps away, hands running through his graying hair. The horizon was melting into fire, the sun slipping behind the edge of the world. He could hear her labored breathing, short, shallow gasps between whimpers of pain. He felt his throat burn. He wanted to scream, at the sky, at God, at himself. Instead, he walked back and dropped to his knees beside her. "Clara, tell me who did this." Her eyes fluttered open, barely conscious. "They wore black coats, said they were after you, said you took something that wasn't yours." Elias froze. His mind flashed back to the night 3 weeks ago, the shootout at the edge of the canyon. 3 men had come after his cattle, armed and wild. He killed one, wounded another. He never found the third, but now he knew. They hadn't forgotten. "It's my fault," he muttered. "I brought this on you." Clara tried to shake her head, but her body trembled too hard. "No, Elias, they would have found me anyway. I stayed because I loved you." The words shattered him. He had spent years building walls, and now she tore them down with her dying breath. Tears blurred his vision, something he hadn't allowed himself since the night he buried his family. "I love you too," he whispered, voice breaking. She smiled faintly, her strength fading. Then, "Do this for me." The revolver felt heavier than ever as he drew it from his belt. The barrel caught the last light of the sun, glinting cold and cruel. His hand trembled as he looked into her eyes one final time. "Elias," she breathed, tears sliding down her cheeks. "It'll be quick, right?" He swallowed hard, nodded once. "It'll be quick." He lifted the gun and froze. Every muscle in his body screamed not to do it. He could see her fear, but also her trust, the trust that he would keep his promise. His finger hovered over the trigger as his vision tunneled, and suddenly he wasn't in the wagon anymore. He was back at his daughter's bedside, hearing her coughs fade into silence. He remembered holding his wife's cold hand after the fever took her. He couldn't do it again. He couldn't be the one to end another life. But Clara's scream tore through his hesitation. "It hurts, Elias, please, please!" He closed his eyes. The sound of her pain was worse than any nightmare. His thumb cocked the hammer. Then, silence. The plains went still. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. A single shot echoed across the valley. Elias sat frozen, the gun smoking in his hand, his heart pounding like a drum of war. His ears rang, his body shook. Clara's breathing had stopped. Her face was peaceful, finally free. He dropped the gun, his hands shaking uncontrollably. Tears blurred his vision as he whispered, "I'm sorry, Clara. I'm so sorry." The last of the daylight faded, leaving him alone with the body of the only woman who'd ever made him feel alive again. He wrapped her in his coat, lifting her gently from the wagon. The earth beneath his boots felt heavier with every step. He carried her to a small rise overlooking the plains, the place she once said she'd want to watch the sunrise forever. He dug with trembling hands until the moon rose high and pale. When he finally laid her to rest, he whispered her name one last time. "I'll find them," he said. "I swear it." The night swallowed his voice, but the promise stayed, written in blood, pain, and the sound of a broken man walking away from the only peace he ever knew. The camera would fade out on Elias, standing alone by the grave, the wind sweeping his hat from his head. His eyes burned not with tears, but with fury. A new dawn would come, and with it, vengeance. The morning after Clara's burial came like a curse. The sun crawled over the horizon, spilling pale light across the plains, revealing the mound of freshly turned earth that now marked the grave of the only person Elias Ward had ever loved after his family's death. The air was thick with dust and regret. Elias stood over the grave, hat in hand, his boots sinking slightly into the soft dirt. His eyes were hollow, his face rough from sleeplessness and grief. He hadn't moved since the night before. The revolver still hung from his hip, cold and silent, yet heavy with memory. The scent of gunpowder still clung to his skin. He couldn't escape it. Elias knelt, tracing Clara's name into the wooden marker he'd carved before sunrise. Each letter was shaky, carved by a hand that trembled not from fear, but from fury barely contained. When he finished, he placed her silver locket, the one she always wore while singing at the saloon, on top of the grave. It caught the sunlight and shimmered for a moment, as if she were still there, smiling in the glow. "I'll find them, Clara," he said, voice low but firm. "They think they took you from me, but all they did was wake something I buried long ago." He rose, strapped his rifle to his saddle, and climbed onto his horse, Dusty. The animal whinnied softly, as if it could feel the storm brewing inside its rider. Elias took one last look at the grave, then turned toward the road leading east, toward the town of Red Bluff. The town was small, a scattering of wooden buildings, a general store, a church, and a saloon where the floorboards creaked and the whiskey stung. Elias rode in slow, his shadow stretching long in the morning sun. The townsfolk watched him with quiet curiosity. His name carried whispers, stories of the rancher who lived alone, who didn't take kindly to strangers. But now, there was something different in his eyes, something darker. He tied his horse outside the saloon and pushed through the swinging doors. The room fell silent. The bartender froze mid-polish. A poker game stopped in mid-hand. "Whiskey," Elias said, his voice gravel. The bartender hesitated, then poured a glass. Elias downed it in one swallow. "You seen 3 men pass through here?" he asked, setting the glass down with a thud. "One of them limps on the left leg, wears a black coat. Another's got a scar from his ear to his jaw." The bartender shifted nervously. "Can't say I have, Mr. Ward, but word's been they've been running supplies out by the Canyon Road, old mining trail." Elias nodded. He reached into his pocket, dropped a silver coin on the counter, and turned to leave. That's when a voice behind him said, "You're looking for trouble, old man." Elias stopped, slowly turned. 3 young cowhands sat at a corner table smirking. One of them, blonde, too confident for his own good, grinned as he stood up. "Heard what happened to that girl of yours. Shame what them boys did. But you ain't gonna fix it." Elias didn't speak. He just walked closer, slow, steady. The air in the saloon grew thick. The boy laughed nervously. "What? You gonna shoot me for talking? You ain't got the guts." Elias's hand moved faster than sight. His revolver came up and pressed against the boy's forehead. The room went dead silent. "Son," Elias said quietly, his eyes ice cold, "there's a difference between talking and disrespecting the dead. You just crossed that line." The boy swallowed hard. Elias held his gaze for one long, unbearable moment, then lowered the gun and turned toward the door. "Next time you open your mouth about her, you won't get a second chance." He left the saloon, the sound of spurs echoing like gunshots. Hours later, the sun was dipping behind the mesas as Elias reached the old mining trail. The canyon loomed ahead, silent except for the distant cry of hawks. The path was littered with old wagon tracks, broken bottles and bones of dead cattle. It was a graveyard for the forgotten, and soon, Elias thought, it would hold 3 more. He dismounted, crouching low near a burned-out campfire. The ashes were fresh. He touched them, felt the lingering warmth. They weren't far. Then he heard it. Laughter echoing down the canyon. Male voices, 3 of them. He followed the sound, moving silent as a ghost through the rocks until he could see them. 3 men gathered around a fire, cooking beans in a pot. Their black coats hung from a nearby branch. One of them limped slightly as he moved, just like Clara said. Elias's blood boiled. He stepped from the shadows, rifle raised. "Don't move." The men froze. Then the one with the limp turned slowly, smirking when he saw him. "Well, I'll be damned. Elias Ward. Didn't think you had the guts to come looking." You killed her," Elias said. "You left her to die in the dirt." The man laughed. "She screamed your name till her throat bled. Guess she thought you'd come for her sooner." Elias fired. The bullet caught him square in the chest, throwing him back against the rocks. The other 2 scrambled for their guns, but Elias was already moving. His second shot dropped the scarred one before he could aim. The third man fired wildly, the shot grazing Elias's arm. He grunted, dropped behind a boulder, reloaded with steady hands. The third outlaw shouted, "You can't take us all, old man." Elias's voice echoed like thunder. "I already did." The last bullet hit true. Silence followed, deep and final. Elias stood breathing hard, smoke rising from his revolver. The canyon was still again, except for the crackle of the dying fire. He walked to the bodies, staring down at them. There was no satisfaction, no peace, only emptiness. He turned his gaze to the sky, the stars just beginning to pierce the darkness. "You can rest now, Clara," he said softly. "It's done." But deep inside he knew it wasn't. Killing them hadn't brought her back. It hadn't quieted the ache in his chest. The West didn't give peace, only survival. And somewhere out there, someone else was waiting to take everything he had left. Elias holstered his gun, mounted his horse, and rode into the night. The wind howled behind him, carrying with it the ghost of a woman's voice, soft, distant, and forgiving. "I love you, Elias." He didn't look back.